Hello Proponomics people, and welcome to the video from Thursday the 28th of March 2024. So first of all, a quick shout out. Tonight I'll be presenting at Adam Vickers' Reading Property Meet, so I'm looking forward to that. Already tickets sold out, so this is not a sales pitch. Adam does do Zoom tickets though, if anybody wants to join remotely and doesn't want to schlep it down to Reading like I'll have to from the West Midlands. But seriously, I'm looking forward to it. It's a great room, good people. If you're anywhere near the locale in future months, and I know he does sell out quite regularly. It's not just because I'm going. I'd love to think it was, obviously, but it's not just because I'm going. But if you're in the locale, I'd highly recommend it. Some really good people to network with. I've done business from that room. I know quite a few of the people in that room. They're active in property. You know, it's a great bunch of people. So get yourself down to RPM when you can. So I'm looking forward to that. So on to today's topic, which is the economic figures that have been released today. So a lack of surprise, really, in as much as no amendments yet. And I use the word yet advisedly because if you don't know, we amend our economic figures in terms of GDP and various other measures actually at the Office for National Statistics. As a nation, they can get amended up to 2 years hence the event happening. So the big debate there's been recently, the US had a recession in the way we still define them in the UK, i.e. 2 quarters of negative growth in a row on the bounce in 2022. They have a panel of economists who don't act particularly quickly but decided within a year that that wasn't really a proper recession, so they didn't even call it a recession. You didn't see a lot of headlines about US economy sliding into recession, whereas there are many more headlines about places like Germany, for example, who are all these big developed countries suffering with a very similar sort of malaise post-pandemic. Big inflation makes GDP difficult to grow. Stagflation was the best of all the horrible outcomes we talked about. Hyperinflation. I mean, we did have hyperinflation in energy prices. There were no two ways about it. And the government acted relatively swiftly and decisively and really did open the checkbook in a big way on that one with a 12-figure sum to underwrite. At one point, whatever it takes was wheeled out in the winter of 2022. So bear that in mind. But stagflation, which is basically economic growth pretty stagnant, not going up much, not going down much, in a time of inflation above target, that's where we've been in the past 12 months at the very least, if not the past 18 months. But inflation hasn't been below target since September 2021. Although all the speculation from the economists who are far more bullish than me on how inflation is under control at this point are saying that we're going to see inflation below 2% as soon as next month. I don't think it'll be in the March print myself, but it could be in the April print because we've got that official 15% drop in energy prices for households. Although, as I've been banging on about, seemingly banging the drum on my own, we've got some massive wage increases being piped into that system in the same month. So people forget consumption is such a big driver of GDP. Let's see if that's particularly inflationary because people have been saving money. But if we've got a bit of spring, bit of good weather and a bit of consumer confidence, let's just see what happens, shall we? I'm not sold on that yet. I think what we all know is we may hit a bottom around that sort of April time in inflation and then have a bit of a bounce back. The bottom might be in May, but we're having a bounce back because energy prices are not continuing to go down in the same way they have been because they're not far off what they were pre-pandemic now, apart from anything else. But growth figures revised, or not revised as the case may be, for quarter 4 2024. So 0.3% negative was the print for quarter 4. It was quarter 3 that was the really slightly controversial one where it was down 0.1. So the smallest rounded number that the ONS will report for GDP going downwards. So we had a minus 0.1 and a minus 0.3. The minus 0.3 has, for the moment, not been amended, is probably the best way to say it. The year on year, bearing in mind 2023's last quarter growth rate was minus 0.2%. So it shows you how much the economy was struggling. If we went down 0.1 and 0.3, it shows you we only did about 0.2 in the first half. So does it really matter at this level? I mean, there's billions and billions of pounds involved. So of course it matters. There's the negative impact it has on consumer sentiment when people, the press love to talk about a recession. It's not very helpful at all. It's really not a recession that has looked anything like the previous recessions. Also that recession of 2020 that no one talks about, when Q1 was a slight trim because of course we had the lockdown in the March, and then Q2 was an absolutely gigantic hemorrhage of a minus 25% quarter. So the biggest recession we've ever had on record that blows away all other recessions by a million years. But big bounce back on the back of that one, and we had an okay time until we had that pandemic supply volatility to deal with, and then Ukraine, Russia, and how that affects us as an energy importing nation. The other bits out this morning, business investment quarter on quarter. We had a very negative print last quarter, not unusual for a Q4 though, 2.8% down. This quarter looks better, 1.4% up. Probably better to look at the year on year, which is 2.8% up. Not as good as was hoped for, hoping for a bit better on both. They're not really widely forecasted in the economic world, but there was a hope that there was going to be above 3% year-on-year business investment. Jeremy Hunt has thrown everything he can at trying to get businesses to invest in terms of allowing people to deduct absolutely as much as they can from anywhere as a business. Forget some of the capital allowance drawdowns we're having, full expensing going on at the moment. And this is a big day to consider that if you're a business owner, because if you are a business owner who ends your year ends at the end of March, like many do, and then thinking about the tax year ending on the 5th of April, you need to make some investments today, get some invoices done to you today if you want to expense them against those corporation tax bills and those personal tax bills, because there are no more working days left in quarter 1 2024. So just bear that in mind. Other figure that was out today is year-on-year car production, up 14.6%, so moving nicely. You've still got some of these base year effects to contend with. You'll know that the new car market was squeezed to high heaven with supply, and the supply chain was disrupted. That's messed up a lot of the base year figures. I'd still see this as coming back to normal. We did have a 21% print last time that figure was released, so it's a pinch of salt really. Does it say a lot about the health of the car industry? I don't think it really does. And of course, lots of people tried to switch to used cars during a tighter time, and that time of energy prices going through the roof would definitely qualify as a tighter time in terms of consumer sentiment, even though the figures, if at that point, didn't say we were in a recession. And that's the problem, of course, with all of these figures back and forth. They don't necessarily talk about the real economy in real time, so it's always good to observe what's going on. There are some of the numbers that I like quite a lot, like for example the flash PMIs that I talk about quite a bit, and the PMIs in general. They're much more real time. I also like the sentiment surveys as a general rule, but you always have to remember with surveys, it just depends what question they're asking, because if surveys are asking, for example, one that's happened many times over the last 8 years or so, are you thinking about selling some properties, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord? Then the answer is inevitably yes, absolutely. It's all terrible, blah, blah, blah. But what we've seen is actions really don't tend to match intentions a lot of the time. What we've seen instead is when the pressure's been put on, especially by the interest rate rising, if you've got variable rate mortgages, that's the time when you're more forced to sell. Landlords are notorious for not moving particularly quickly. Property doesn't move particularly quickly. Many people have not yet come to an incorporation solution, even though it's 9 years ago now. Well, certainly in 3 months' time, it'll be 9 years ago that fabled Gideon Osborne budget came along, amending Section 24 of the Finance Act, proposing Clause 24 to amend it, that changed things so that landlords could not expense their mortgage relief in full. Although, of course, they still do get an element of a tax credit, a 20% tax credit against it. So maybe it's not always as bad as it sounds, but it does mean there's a partial tax on turnover, which is inherently significantly unfair, let's face it. So Catherine Mann at the Bank of England is speaking again later today. I'm sure there'll be some thoughts on that in the supplement. Obviously, we're going into a weekend wrapped around a bank holiday, so there's a 4-day break. I will still be, I'm sure, throwing out some videos, because apart from anything else, I need to do my 4 pillars video for this week. So that will be out tomorrow morning. And then also there's on Monday, even though it's bank holiday, on the 1st of the month, the bank that doesn't rest, Nationwide, put their housing prices out year on year, month on month. The expectation is another positive print. I think the market's probably relatively going a bit sideways at the moment. There's been an awful lot of new stock introduced to the market, as lots of people who perhaps don't consider too much about what other people are doing have just thought, right, they held off last year, they didn't want to go on the market while the market was pretty flat. They're now going on the market and they're having a go. So that's where we are. And I will be at the forefront of all of that and hope to be informing you all. And if you're coming to Reading tonight and you're watching this video, please do come up and say hi. I do love it when we're in a room and I give a presentation and people stop to take the time to tell me that they watch the channel. And if you are watching the channel but you don't subscribe as yet, please could I ask you to hit the subscribe button. I'm really getting quite close to my 1,000 subscribers, and that's a really nice milestone that's going to make me inspired to carry on. Thanks.